You know, when you picture the Sahara Desert, you probably think of endless sand, maybe caravans carrying salt and gold. But what if I told you the most precious cargo wasn't a commodity? It was knowledge, ideas, history, entire legal systems, all written down, carefully preserved. This was a world where libraries weren't buildings, they were on the move, carried on the backs of camels, an entire intellectual world just thriving out there in the sand. Pretty amazing, right?
So that begs the question, who were these people? Who were the guardians of all this wisdom, the scholars of the Sand Sea? Well, they were a very specific group within the Tuareg people, and they were known as the Kel Es-Suq. Their story, it's just this incredible tale of devotion to learning in what has to be one of the toughest environments on Earth.
So let's break this down. The name Kel Es-Suq literally means the people of the market, and they were the intellectual heart of Tuareg society, especially in the Adrar Ini Focus region. Now, they weren't warriors, and they weren't really traders in the usual sense. Think of them more as custodians. Their whole purpose, their sacred duty, was to preserve and teach Islamic knowledge and the written word. This role was passed down through generations because they were part of this really unique clerical caste called the Inislamen.
And that right there, that's what made them so different. I mean, in a society that we often imagine as being full of fierce warriors and all about survival, the Kel Es-Suq stood for something else entirely. They were pacifist scholars. So Tuareg society had this really fascinating structure. On one side, you've got your warrior castes. Their job is protection, warfare, all of that. But then completely separate, you had the Ineslamen. These guys were a clerical caste completely devoted to study and law. Get this, they were pacifists. They were the neutral judges, the advisors you'd go to solve a conflict. So while the warriors protected the people physically, you could say the Ineslamen protected the culture, the law, and the moral compass of the entire society. So here's the key takeaway, right? The Ineslamen were a hereditary class whose power didn't come from a sword, but from a pen. Their whole existence was built around education and religious study, a tradition passed down from one generation to the next. Now, a tradition this deep doesn't just pop up overnight. Nope, it grew over centuries, and eventually it led to this incredible golden age of manuscripts, an era that really brought that whole idea of a library on the move to life. And you can actually see how it all unfolded over time. Islam arrives in the 7th century, and by the 8th to 11th centuries, you start to see scholarship just flourishing along those big desert trade routes. Then, by the 12th century, you get more formal schools and learning centers. But it's really the 15th to the 17th centuries when things just explode. That was their golden age. And during this period, the Kel Es-Suq were unbelievably busy. They were creating huge numbers of these beautiful, complex manuscripts. And they weren't just copying old texts. No way! They were in on the big theological debates of the day. But their real genius, their true innovation, was creating nomadic schools and these mobile libraries. It meant that education wasn't stuck in one place. It could literally travel with people across the desert. And the work itself was absolutely an art form. They used this gorgeous, flowing script that actually had its roots in Andalusia called Kufic Maghribi. The ink? Made from things like carbon and gallnuts. And they wrote on super durable vellum or high-quality paper that had to be imported from really far away. The whole point was to create these perfect, standardized religious texts, to make sure the quality and the words were consistent everywhere. But here's the thing. The influence of the Kel Es-Suq didn't just stop at the edge of the desert. Their scholarship was a bridge, connecting them to the biggest and brightest intellectual centers of the entire Islamic world. And there is no better example of this, none, than their deep connection to that legendary city of Timbuktu. The Kel Es-Suq weren't just visiting scholars at Timbuktu's famous Sankore University. No, they were foundational to it. They were the head copyists and editors, the people who made sure the city's massive libraries were accurate. They were respected judges and legal advisors. In fact, they were key players in setting up the whole system of madrasas, schools, all across the Sahel region. And their reputation for being brilliant thinkers spread far and wide. It even got the attention of some of the biggest celebrity scholars of the era, like the great Egyptian scholar Al-Suyuti. And this wasn't a one-way street, The Kel Es-Suq were writing back and forth with the top minds in places like Cairo, getting into these really complex debates on Islamic law. Their work was known, it was respected, and it was recognized by scholars all across the Mediterranean. It just goes to show the Sahara wasn't a barrier to knowledge, it was a superhighway. So after all that, this incredible intellectual legacy that survived for centuries in one of the most extreme climates on the planet, well,
Today, it's facing its biggest threats ever. The story now is really one of survival.
The last century or so has been unbelievably tough for them. First, French colonial rule completely disrupted their nomadic way of life. Then came the catastrophic droughts in the Sahel that wiped out their herds. And on top of that, they've been politically and economically pushed to the margins in the new countries that were formed. All of this means that their priceless, ancient manuscripts are now in very real danger of being lost for good.
And that leaves us with a really big question, doesn't it? The story of the Kel Es-Suq is so much more than just the history of one group of people. It's a powerful testament to the human drive for knowledge against literally all odds. So when a culture's library, especially one as unique as this one, is at risk of disappearing, it's not just their memory on the line. What part of our shared human story do we all stand to lose forever?